you everybody for joining the speech. Today we are going to talk about the projects, and in a while I will explain why I think that we can live happily ever after without projects. So, is it a talk about know something tag? Sorry. Yes, it is. And I have to give a few comments. Massimo introduced me with several roles. My current role is an Agile and transformation coach, sometimes executive coach also. For 4 years, I worked in a system integrator, and my daily routine was to work on projects. And I was unhappy. We had several problems that I will try to explain during this talk. Actually, I'm a developer. As I told to many of my friends, I've born as a developer, and as any smoker, a developer will die being a developer, even if he doesn't code for a while or for years, just like me. So I am a developer inside and also an Agile coach, and I will die as a developer. And I don't like projects. I give you a bit of context. In 2011, Mark Anderson, the founder of Netscape, among other things, said that software is eating the world. What he meant was that any company is a software company. Think of it, car manufacturers are software companies. Think of Tesla. Tesla is a huge hardware for running their software. It's very expensive hardware. Banks run on softwares. Insurance, any company in 2020 is a software company. Software is running the world. It's not only hitting the world. And in this context, as has been said by Steve Denning, Agile is hitting the world. You remember, the Agile Manifesto said, before the values and principles, that we are uncovering, and I say still uncovering, better ways of developing software by doing, helping others doing it. And it works because Agile organizations are the ones that are the fastest to adapt to a continuously changing world. Did you ever heard of VUCA acronym? Anyone? Who knows VUCA? VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Our world has these characteristics, and the ability to survive and thrive in this world is to adapt faster, okay? About projects, maybe my opinion is not as strong as the opinion of Martin Fowler, that a little bit more than 1 year ago, in the state of Agile in Australia, said that we have to get rid of software projects as a notion. And we have to switch to a product-oriented view of the world and organize product team around that things that are more lasting than a project, okay? So what is a project? By the way, how many of you are project managers? Is there any, okay? How many of you are currently working on a project? Okay, a lot of you. So, why are you going, are you willing to leave working with projects? Do you? Or do you like working on projects? How many of you like working on projects? 3. How many of you don't like? Okay, how many of you don't care about working on projects? Just to check if anyone has answered. Okay, thank you. What is a project? For the purpose of this discussion, I think that we have to go to the most known definition. The most known definition is given by the Product Management Institute, who said you can. There is a screenshot of the page that you can find on the Project Management Institute website. What is project management is defined that instead of what is a project. A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. And then we have a problem here because software products are not temporary. I would say that they are forever until you decide to dismiss them, okay? But you still treat them with ephemeral things like projects. And that's weird. We might go on the definition because among the things that you can read on the PMI Institute is that when you start a project, you assemble a brand new team of people who potentially never worked together and start making the project. And as soon as the project ends, you dismiss the team. Wow. We will go back on this topic in a while. Now, what is the no projects? Sorry, I forgot an S. No projects, I would define it as the deliberate act of continuous product management. What I mean is that it's more interesting and important to focus on the product instead of the way we build the product, because the product will last much longer than the effort that we take to build the first release of the product and then the next release of the product. And so it's continuous product management. It's not just we release the first version and then goodbye. So the first step is to switch from a project to a product mindset. By the way, this is being advocated by many people, also by at least 3 of the signers of the Agile Manifesto. One is Martin Fowler, the other one is Mike Cohn, and the third is Jim Highsmith, that recently published a book in which tells the same things, okay? So how do we live projects? I suggest to move in, just like in a journey, in 4 stages, okay? So we walk them up, sorry for the bad end drawing, in which the first stage is to go to value experiments over projects. The second stage is to focus on stable teams over temporary endeavor. The first stage is to focus on outcomes instead of execution. And the fourth and last stage is to focus on products instead of software. This might be a bit contradictory, but we will see it in a while. Let's start from the first stage, experiments over projects. In the last years, we had, let me say, the focus has shifted on making quick experiments and having feedbacks, shortening the feedback loop. Making experiments is much better than making projects, because if you fail an experiment, what you have is a learning. If you fail a project, what you have is a failure, okay? So let's focus on experiments. I would cite Richard Feynman, who said that it doesn't matter how beautiful your theory is, it doesn't matter how smart you are. If the experiment doesn't agree with if the assumption, the theory doesn't agree with the experiment, it is plainly wrong. And we have to remember that when we make a project, when we make a software product, the biggest assumption that we have to challenge, to demonstrate, is that the requirements, the feature that we are supposed to put in the software are the ones that our customer needs and want. But when we make a project, we definitely focus on the features, on the requirements. By the way, requirements means something that is required. That means also mandatory. Okay, so there is no negotiation on requirements if you stick on the words. The approach is the one that Eric Ries discussed in those two books, The Lean Startup, and I prefer the startup way, that is how organizations that are not startup can leverage experimentation and quick feedback loops to gain better results with the market. The second stage was about stable teams, however temporary and ever. I would refer to something that is well known. When you have a winning team, you don't change the winning team. You try to keep it. This is being described with a couple of curves that are very similar. The first one on the left is by Tuckman. This was made in the 60s. When you put a group of people together, the performance initially decreases, and then after the team starts understanding each other, they reach the tipping point and then start to perform. A different point of view has been given by Katzenberg and Smith more recently. And when you put people together, it is not a team. It's a working group. You have a team after a lot of time. And so if you stick by the definition, and actually it's what happens in many situations, when you start a project, you assemble a new team, and this new team has to go down to the valley of the performance and start reaching the performance level while they are approaching the end of the project. And as soon as they reach the end of the project and they are a performing team, you dismiss them. You dismiss the team. It's crazy, in my opinion. Products over software. Sometimes developers like me are more focused on technicalities, of being cool in writing the new technologies, new stuff, writing supposedly cool solutions, genius solution. It's a bit nerdy. And so they are more focused on writing excellent code than on writing excellent products. And this is a mistake. The technical excellence to which the Agile Manifesto refers to in the principles is not about writing the best software possible, but writing the best software product possible. Okay? So it's writing a solution that the customer will use, not writing the best technical software that no one will use. By the way, in Agile, in Agile Atelier, there is a problem. I say atelier instead of factory because a friend of mine said that factory means that we are industrializing software, which is not, okay? There is a lot of craftsmanship in software. So in Agile Atelier, a good PO should drive the team to write software that someone will use. The first stage is outcomes over execution. Execution in projects is focused on outputs. One of the problems is that when you run a project, you are focused on releasing outputs, in producing bits of software without being sure that someone will like it. There is no care for value. Once you've frozen the requirements, even Agile factories have the same problems. Then you focus on outputs and no more on what is really important, that is outcomes, that is the ability to change the behavior of our customer and user. This is much more important than writing everything that was in the backlog. Okay? The first stages are not enough, so I think that it's useful to have also some guiding principles to help the reaching no projects situation, project world. First of all, organizations should be able to found capacity instead of founding the scope. When an organization needs to make a new development, a new product, the first thing that they have to do is to list what is supposed to be included in the product, write in a scope, and then have the scope approved and a budget released to that scope. Instead, if you found capacity, you let the team and the organization free to adapt to changes, and having a performing team that is able to switch from a product to another, to change priorities, to move to new targets and goals of the organization. Okay? The second principle, which is somehow difficult to implement, is that there is no better place to evolve and maintain a software product than in the team that created it. Of course it is. If someone wrote the software, is the right people to give a look and solve the problems on the software. But this is not always easy to do, and because, for instance, one of the arguments is that maintenance is operational expenditures, while development is capitalization expenditures. But there are ways to manage this. So, okay. The third thing is to bring the work to the team. When you manage projects by the book, what you have is that you create work, okay, and then you assemble team, and you bring team to the work. So first you have to work, to find the work, and then you have to bring people to that work. Instead, it's much better to keep team stable, as we said earlier, and bring new or upcoming work to the existing teams. It's much more effective and efficient. To enable some of the guiding principles that we have stated so far, we have to apply a lean portfolio management strategy, which is not a project portfolio strategy, it's a product portfolio strategy. We have to slice our product initiatives in tiny pieces that can be prioritized, just like you do on the backlog, but at a higher level, and you have to review the project portfolio, let's say at least once a month or once a quarter, and then change and adapt your strategy. For the very same reason, you have to be lean with budget. If you discuss yearly budget, you have a problem. You are, let me say, chaining the organization for 1 year. I would say even more than 1 year, because when you start making budgets, it's 3, 4, 5, 6 months before. And to gather information to prepare a budget request, you have to work a few months earlier and make a lot of assumptions, which are probably no more true when you have the money to spend. So you have to be more lean with budget. This is, of course, a corollary of what we have discussed about teams and what Martin Fowler said. We have to organize products around stable, motivated, and accountable teams. Scaling. A lot of people discuss about scaling. There are a lot of scaling frameworks right now that are being discussed in the socials. I'm not going into the discussion of which is the best scaling framework. Scaling, with probably the exception of Scrum at Scale, is mainly a matter of the size of the product you have to develop. It's not a matter of the size of the organization. Many organizations start to scale just because they are big. They don't. They have to scale if their products are big, and probably not even in this case. It's more interesting to focus on the scaling instead of scaling. And since scaling increases the complexity, you have to scale just if and when needed. When you decide to move to a product initiative, you have to ask, is it worth making this product? Not how much it costs. Because when the question is how much it costs, it's very easy for CFO and project manager and business line managers to have the Black Friday syndrome. Okay, it's cheap, I'll buy it. Okay, it's a huge discount, I'll buy it, I make it. I make this product, I make this. But no one cares about, is it worth? How many of you have useless things, both on the Black Fridays, staying at home? Maybe you recycle them at Santa's as a gift to your not so best friends. Okay. Keeping the feedback loop short is critical. When you make a product, you have to validate your assumptions as soon as possible. And so you have to not necessarily make a continuous release, but at least you have to have a way to validate your assumption continuously through an approach that probably in the end could be continuous release. One of the major problems, even in Agile Atelier, is that roadmaps are built on features. When you make a roadmap, if you follow, let's say, the user story mapping approach, or whatever, Jeff Matton or Roman Pichler approach is to build in roadmaps, what you will end to have is a list of features you expect for every milestone. This is kind of waterfall, I mean. You are just saying that this feature will be available within a specific date. What I suggest instead is to focus on defining which needs we want to address by each of the milestones in the roadmap. So let's say, for instance, that we are on the 31st of October. By January 2020, we want to have people being able to work without projects in that organization. This is a need, this is a desire maybe. This is not the feature that enable this desire. This give the teams, the product teams, which is not just the development team, the freedom to choose the best way to address those needs and to discuss with the customers and validate with the customers that the solution they are bringing on are the solution that the customer actually needs. Okay? So what is a project? Once again, is continuous product management. Okay, it's I'm just checking. Okay, it's okay. We need to focus on products, not on projects. Someone argues that. Do you remember the definition of projects that I give at the beginning of the talk? A project is a temporary endeavor to create a unique product. So since you say that projects build products, you read also on the contrary that products are built by projects. But we don't need projects to build software products. A friend of mine recently switched to a different company, and his role is to be service owner. He has several products. He's a big company with several brands, and the products that my friends manage are customized for the different brands of the organization. And he said, you know, Dimitri, I stopped making projects. I just asked a budget for the whole year to found a team to manage the product because it was easier for us. And you know what happened? The CFO didn't have any objection to that. And I was quite surprised. And most of all, one of the brand changed the CEO just a couple of months after we switched to a product mindset. And instead of following the project's approach in which the request for the former CEO would have been approved in a project, a budget allocated for this initiative, and then we had to continue working on this project, I could just switch to the new goals of the new CEO without asking anyone. And I was able to give him an answer in a couple of weeks instead of months. That is, he didn't know anything about no projects, by the way. And I say, great, Ciro, this is no projects. And he said, what are you talking about? But okay. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry once said that perfection is achieved when there is nothing more to take away instead of add. We want to simplify the way software products and digital services which are built on top of software products are built. And so what I'm suggesting is to stop making projects and live happily ever after without the pains of the projects. Okay, I give you a few references. On this topic, in 2018, 3 books have been written, 2 by Alan Kelly, Project Myopia, and Continuous Digital, because one of the discussions that there has been on the social, and it is still active, is about the usage of no. Why are you saying no? What is your proposal? The proposal of Alan is Continuous Digital. My proposal is Continuous Product Management. We are pretty on the same page, but with something different. Shane Hastie and even Layburn wrote the book No Projects, which you can download on InfoQ for free, or you can buy on Amazon also. Interesting readings also, Project to Product. The Lean Startup, I already discussed it on that. Beyond budgeting, very interesting, because it's one of the key to switch on the finance level from a project to a product mindset. Steve Denning, The Age of Agile, a different perspective on agility, which is different from capital A Agile. Outcomes over Output is an interesting book which discuss almost the same of the, I don't remember, 8th principle, which is outcomes over execution, okay? And then the release candidate of my book, you can take it on LeanPub. I'm writing this book since February. I'm working on this topic since 1 year and a half. So if you want to participate, giving feedback on the talk, or also on the topics that are written on this book, you can. And then questions.
Okay, I'm arriving. Sorry. Hi.
Hi.
So my question is simple. As we see that most people don't like projects, and it seems to be not that efficient, why are we still using it in the vast majority of company?
Sorry, can you repeat? Because I'm a little bit deaf, and so I cannot hear you.
So,
Thank you.
why do we use project as a work strategy instead of the kind of strategy you have been describing, since it's not to be satisfying, it's not to be efficient as well? Why do we stick with that?
Okay. If I got your question, I don't know why we are using project. Maybe because we are used to make projects. Maybe because we are. I think you have to take this from different point of view. Big organizations make projects because they have decided to outsource their IT capability. They don't have the capability, have to buy the capability, and they don't want to risk to buy more capability than they need. They still prefer to have projects to keep things under control. And this is a problem because many big organizations became project-centric instead of product-centric. And so they are not able to satisfy their customer, either internal or external customers, because they don't focus on products. We use projects in some cases because the CFO asks us for making projects. And there is another situation in which projects are probably the only way to go. If you are a system integrator, what you are going to sell is a project, which is kind of weird because no one will buy a project. Actually, I would buy the final result of the project, but instead there is someone who sells me a project, and I will buy the project, not the product. This is kind of problematic in my opinion. This is a situation which cannot be solved easily, but I worked with a couple of system integrators that are starting selling the team instead of selling the individuals that are building the projects, which is a minor change from center point of view because you are still selling a project, but it's a big change because you are selling the performance of a high-performing team that is working continuously together on different projects during the time. So we have different situations. I had a discussion, you can also find it on Twitter because it was a public discussion, for instance, with someone who said that for compliance reason, you have to have a project. For accountancy reason, you have to have a project. I don't think so. The CFO in Italy, at least, with which I discussed the topic, were not in agreement with but maybe in other countries it can be an issue. Any other questions?
Anybody else? Okay, I have a question for you. How what are the people feelings when you start to talk about experiments and no more about projects?
Depends. It depends.
You're a consultant, right?
People has mixed feelings about this. Because experiments are seen just like, okay, let's do whatever you think, just waste our money, and who cares about the result? If it succeeds, it's okay. If it doesn't, it's not okay, but who cares? We have founded an experiment, so for us it's okay. But making experiments, especially when you have a product on the wild, on the market, it's not that easy. I give you an example. Candy Crush. How many of you know of Candy Crush? Candy Crush Saga? Okay? It's a game on smartphones, and also on Facebook, I think. A couple of months ago, they make a change. They made an experiment, and this was declared in one of the support forum of Candy Crush. Candy Crush gives you some limits on the number of lives you have to play the game. A new life is given you after half an hour. So the experiment that was run by the development team was to give you a life every hour instead of half an hour. That means that once you finish your life is, instead of being able to start again in 2 hours and a half, You have to wait 5 hours. And there was a huge complaint by the crew. Many people left forever Candy Crush. They lost customers. They are not paying customers. They are some of them buys in-app gadgets. Many of them just see the advertisement, but they lost customers because of wrongly made experiments. Making experiments is just not. It's not doing whatever you want. It's making something that is aimed at generating an impact on the customers, at changing the behavior of our customers, with good reasons. Okay, so you found on experiments with good reason. Another thing that is important in experiment is how you define an experiment. You have to set metrics, KPI, whatever. You have to define how do you measure that your experiment is successful. You have to fix a budget and also a time frame in which you want the experiment to be completed. Once you run an experiment, after a while, you have to decide the experiment confirmed my theory. My experiment did not confirm my theory, but confirmed the contrary, or the experiment was inconclusive. And you have to take decision based on the result. If the experiment is inconclusive, it's just like the experiment has failed, but still, you learned something that you didn't know before starting the experiment. So there is big value in making experiments instead of having large assumptions and test them after 1 year, 2 years. It doesn't work.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Sorry. One point on the 10 principles, you say Abli al-Nen portfolio management strategy. What it means? What is the? What can you put in the real world?
Okay. When I talk about the portfolio management strategy, in this case, I cite one of the scaling frameworks, probably the most hated one, which is SAFe, which has some very complicated stuff, but has very good points. The portfolio management strategy that is in SAFe is a good starting point in which you slice your product strategy in, your product's ideas in tiny slices. You prioritize in order to have the fastest possible validation of your hypothesis, and you prioritize. You give the priority of the product steps and the product parts that you want to define. Classical project portfolio management is different because it's mainly focused on the managing what is currently under work, what we are currently working. So you have a huge dashboard of all the projects that have been already started, not about what will happen in the future. I would focus on what will happen in the future. What happened in the past is lessons learned, but let's forget it and start again looking at the future. Okay?
Okay, the last question?
I have a short question about the difference for you between having a concrete product you sell as a company, as an institution, or on the other hand, if you don't have anything concrete, so you don't have a portfolio element that you can sell, but the only element you have is very, very abstract. So for example, the universities, they're selling knowledge. That's the product they do. And therefore investing continuous into the product knowledge is totally different, and projects tend to have a concrete time frame, and that's also an advantage.
Okay. So I'm not sure what is the question actually.
How to? Yeah. The question is, in a product world, where
Yes.
you have a concrete thing, you can go beyond the projects,
Okay.
where you go and continuous develop and redefine your product to get better. But if you don't have a concrete product, something that does not change or something changes completely
Okay.
different, how to go there without
Okay,
project?
I understand. Yes, there are many software products which are not really products from a different point of view. There are situations in which making a project is probably the best situation. We are in a Plone conference, so once you have set up the CMS for your customer, what did you sell? What does the customer have in his hands? He has a product that you are not doing. It's the Plone community that is developing the product. And probably you don't have to manage that product. So in this case, project is probably most appropriate. The same applies, for instance, for migrations. When you have to migrate from one version or from one software, legacy software, to a new software, the bits, the piece of software, the pieces of code that you write to migrate from the old platform to the new platform is a throwaway. I mean that once you reach the goal of migration, you don't care about this software anymore. It's lost forever. It's not useful anymore. At the same time, the principles that are behind the projects, my view of no projects, can be applied because the team that realized that project can move to another project and at least try to keep some of the things that are important together, just like people. Okay. But I agree, there are situations in which projects are still appropriate, and you have to decide. In many cases, you can have a product point of view of the world. Also in large organizations which have a lot of line of business, software can be seen as a product. But for instance, one of the major problems that I saw in my experience is, for instance, for ERP. Okay, ERP are a product from Microsoft, SAP, and whoever point of view, but they are not products from the customer point of view. They are. There is something in the middle because Microsoft and SAP doesn't sell the software to the end customer. They sell the software to the partner, which make the customization, and the customization doesn't change so often. But still, you have probably to keep an eye on the product, because even if it doesn't change so often, it changes because the business changes, because the company changes, because the world surrounding the company changes. So even in those cases, I think that in the coming years, a shift to a product mindset is necessary for companies to survive. Not for all of them, but little by little, it will happen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dimitri, for sharing your experience.
Thank you all.